Welcome everyone to MRPA's Lunch and Learn session. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ovan. Of course, I have Adrian with me. Before we get started, a couple of house rules. Just reminder to stay on mute. You can have your camera on if you like, or you can cut it off. Totally up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. Just wanted to let you know, if you're interested in receiving CEUs, please place your name in the chat box, email address in the chat box. And once we receive it, you will get a survey and you complete the survey and you'll be able to see if you're approved for CEUs at that particular point in time. You will receive a code. Again, we're going to utilize the chat box and we'll be monitoring the chat box if you have any questions. That way we can allow Susan to continue to present. If you have any questions, please put in the chat box and we will get to them in a timely fashion. All right. So today's topic, as you all know, is positive behavior strategies. We are thrilled to have Susan Potts be our speaker today. She's a therapeutic recreation service inclusion service manager for Howard County Recreation and Parks. And Susan, take it away.
Thanks, Ovan, and thanks everybody for being here today. I'm sure, given everybody in the room, we're all experts in this area, so I don't claim to be the expert. I just claim to be someone that's practiced a lot of different methods. Just from, so you can kind of get a sense of where we're at right now with COVID, is that we are operational. We have camps running full day. We never stopped doing programs. We went to a emergency childcare format. So we've been working through the whole pandemic thing and dealing with some behavioral strategies and stuff as well. We do inclusion in our department as well as therapeutic programming. I will say that our TR camps did not operate. We made the decision to pull them to an outdoor setting and our families didn't support that. Our schools went to a mask mandate and I just didn't want to be dealing with kids that weren't wearing masks. And frankly, our staff were pretty adamant that they weren't going to be coming back to work in that type of a setting. So that's been some of our challenges, and that could be a whole nother PLC is the challenges. We're planning on going to in-person programming in the fall. We have a high vaccination rate here in Howard County. We also will be doing virtual programs as well because those were so successful. And then we're talking about doing a hybrid approach. So that'll be exciting as well. So just kind of a little lay of the land there and what we've been dealing with. I will say that we've had a lot of behavioral challenges this summer. So that's been something that I think that's higher, more noticeable than probably previous summers where we're doing just a lot more social inclusion, but we're doing a lot of behavioral stuff. And I think Ovan and I worked a lot together this summer with a particular camper as well. So I put together a PowerPoint, and again, I'm not the behavior expert, but this is a lot of the stuff that we're using and implementing. I'm going to say upfront, we are investing a lot of time and energy into site evaluations where we go on site and it's not just a 5-minute visit, it's a 2.5, 3-hour visit to the site to try and problem solve, see what's happening. So I have a team, there's 4 of us on our team, and we are all doing this type of work, going out to different camps and spending a good quantity of time. I know that everybody doesn't have that ability. That's just been the best approach for us to kind of really embed ourselves with the camp and see what's working and offer strategies for success. I'm gonna share this screen. So you should be seeing the screen. That was my reminder for Ovan. So we all know that children want boundaries. They help us. They make the difference. We want boundaries in our lives. We all like to focus within what are the gray areas? What's the black and white? How do I push boundaries? We all need those boundaries. I'm hoping that today I'm going to be sending out the PowerPoint to you. And then you can take what you want for your staff trainings. But we have to get our staff to understand that boundaries are okay. Everyone needs them. We all function. A boundary is that your time card is due on Thursday. That's a boundary. That's when I have to have it. If you want to get paid, You will submit your time card on Thursday. That's the example I always use with my staff, and that's usually a good buy-in from them. So just, oh, there's transitions. Look, I got technical. So why do we have to do this understanding of challenging behavior? Why do these kids have to be in our programs? That's what I hear a lot of. Well, first of all, it's an ADA accommodation. Second of all, it's becoming more of a trend that neurotypical individuals also can have some behavioral issues. Particularly now with the pandemic, what I have seen, and I'm not picking on my staff, Ovan, I'm not picking on anybody, but the individual with a disability is getting singled out when it's a whole camp of, 7, 8 boys that are around the same developmental age, acting and being roughhousing and having that inappropriate behavior. But they seem to want to single out, Brent over here. And I'm like, we have all the boys are doing the same thing. They're getting sticks. It's an outdoor camp. They're poking each other with the sticks. So we go back to what are the expectations for that program? So it's not just about the individuals with the disability and needing that accommodation. We're also seeing a little bit more behavioral stuff. I think given the pandemic and the isolation that, oh my gosh, I'm with a group of kids and I don't know how to police myself anymore. They're rambunctious, the energy level's a little bit higher. They forget about social boundaries. So I think that's probably been some of our challenge this summer. And Ovan might agree with that as well. So what is behavior? And you might say, well, it's anything negative. Well, behavior is anything that you can see or hear. It has to be observable and measurable. And it's positive and negative. We tend to focus on the negative when we talk about behavior, but the reality is that there's positive behavior. I like it when the dishes in the sink are done at night before I go to bed. And if I do them, great. If somebody else in the house does them, fantastic. But if they're left, if you take your dirty dishes and you leave it in the sink, that makes me absolutely crazy. I don't know why, it's just a pet peeve. I can date it all the way back to college when my roommate didn't do her dishes, so we put them in her bed. We gathered up like a week's worth of dishes and put them in her bed. And that's how we managed her negative behavior. And you can comment on that. But she did her dishes after that. Amy just couldn't do her dishes. I don't know why. I'm thinking till this day, she probably does the same thing. So it can be positive or negative. And I think we have to make that differentiation with our staff that there's good positive behaviors too. Please and thank you. Great behaviors. I don't like you, I hate you kind of things. Those are negative behaviors. So understand that behavior can be both positive and negative. We tend to always go with it's a negative. So the troubling behavior, and you can categorize these in any way you want. Running and eloping are my big things. This one is a safety issue for me. Biting is also a big issue for me. Hitting, wandering, spitting, foul language, stealing, property destruction, yelling, lying, pitching, throwing. Everyone has a little bit of different, like how they would rate these. Some agencies, property destruction is a definite no, and you're not going to be able to be successful in the program. If you break something, our agency is probably going to replace it and we'll go from there depending on what it is. But the elopement piece, we have a really fine line of where we draw the line, and it's pretty quick. It's just a safety issue for our staff. It's a liability, safety issue for the participant, and it's just something that we just don't tolerate. We'll work with you on some of the other stuff through suspensions and stuff, but the eloping and running, and every agency is going to be different. Your tolerance level is going to be different. So identify what your troubling behaviors are. And if you have a priority one that your agency is like, nope, this is a no-go for us, then talk about what those actions are. We actually have elopement written into our behavioral practices. So it's very clear in our parent manual how that's going to be addressed. Okay, behavior of staff responses. for every behavior, there's an appropriate staff response. Sometimes our staff don't respond appropriately. I'm sure we've all had examples of things that our staff have said that we'd rather they not say or do. So talk to the staff about what are appropriate responses when you are having some kind of behavior. Yelling and screaming at the kids is not an appropriate strategy. We talk about different things that we can't do in our trainings, and I'm sure you do the same thing. But for every behavior, there's a staff response. And so that's when we can talk about negative responses and positive responses and give them the tools for what those positive responses should be. I want to talk about tolerance. I think this one is really important. Some of you may have childcare type programs. We do. I forget how many sites we have, but when it's all done and said, on a normal year, we have close to 3,000, 4,000 kids in our childcare setting. The tolerance is that level of discomfort. If I asked you to put your index finger on your desk right now and hold it there and just keep pressure on it and just keep doing that, eventually it's going to get uncomfortable and you're not going to be able to tolerate it anymore. That's what we're talking about, is what is a discomfort. And what typically happens is that fall starts, everybody's happy to be back in school and the staff are engaged. And then by April, I'm hearing they've been doing this behavior all year long and it's just, we can't take it anymore. It's just, this is the behavior. Well, the problem is that you tolerated the behavior September, October, November, December, January, February, March. Now we're in April and your tolerance level is waned because staff are burnt out or exhausted by spring break. So my typical response in those types of situations is that you all have allowed a behavior to continue. There's not a whole lot I can do about it at this point. I can come in and try, but you all have ingrained that behavior to be allowed. Working with kids is challenging. We know this. It's not an easy job and they don't share our same agenda. If you think every child's going to get on board with what you had planned that day, let's have a reality check. They're going to change it up. So we have to expect delays. We have to expect changes. We have to have triple plans. You have to have a backup plan for the backup plan. I was at a camp. They were trying to teach volleyball to 3 and 7-year-olds. I did really, really odd range of ages to me, but I don't run that camp. I was just there observing. And volleyball would not have been a skill I would have exposed them to. Messy backyard, I would have played that game first, then maybe introduce volleyball. And messy backyard is where you try to get all the balls on one side or the other, you break them into teams. But the way it was introduced was very chaotic, very confusing. The kids didn't get it. The staff weren't engaged. So that activity just kind of died. And then it was the free play where the boys picked up sticks and started poking each other. And it just led to those types of things. So when we talk about the evaluation of the site, you'll be able to see how I went through my sheet and said, okay, these are the challenges. This is what we could change. So we need to expect those delays. We need to be flexible and have backup plans. And that might be the resource that you have to provide, is the activities that are your backups. When it fails, this is where you go to. These are the things you do, and having that equipment on hand and training your staff in those activities. I think that's the other thing is that we can do is actually train the staff to what a day looks like and train them by teaching them how to play those activities, to have them play the game while you're facilitating. So we've been doing a lot of that training and teaching folks how to play the games, putting them in that situation as if they were the camper. I don't believe that behavior is meant to be challenging. It just shows a lack of coping skills. And I would think that we might be having some coworkers that have a lack of coping skills. Now that some of us are back in the office and they haven't seen each other for like 18 months, people's tolerance levels are a little different. So kind of put yourself into that feeling. So speaking of environments, just a quick question. What has been some of your environments in the past 18 months? And Ovan, if you can just kind of give me a couple, that would be great.
All right, checking the chat.
Somebody's worked from home, right?
Yep, I see home. Corey put down home. Thank you for sharing that, Corey.
Most people been at home, a little bit in the office, maybe wearing masks in the office. So your environment has changed, and we're back at work full time. And it's interesting. There's no mask mandate for us, but I'm still masking.
Yep.
And, that's a little uncomfortable. So my environment has changed. I've even kind of made it a rule that you need to ask before you come in my office because, I'm vaccinated, but I'm still apprehensive because I don't know who is vaccinated. So I just say, can you stand at my door? If it's a private conversation, let's video chat. So my environment has changed. I'm a pretty social person. I tend to seek you out if I can have a conversation versus try to do it on the phone or via email. I like that interaction. So our environments have changed. The environments of our kids have changed. So the precipitating factor that we are bringing into the programs along with our staff who are probably high school, college age, their factors have changed too. So we're all bringing our integrated experience and baggage together. And we're going to have a great time. So that there is a huge challenge. What we need to be communicating with our staff is an understanding of, yes, we know you bring stuff into work and so do the kids. Our kids, our home environments, it's a weird summer. I have had more parents tell me their life drama than in the 14 and a half years I've worked at the county. I know more about people's marriage issues than I could possibly even want to tell you. It's weird. And I know it's a play on getting me to be sympathetic and not expel their child or whatever, but I'm like, whoa. And I think about the kid that's in that environment. How do they not come into our program and not bring all of that anxiety and stress with them? And then we have staff that are reacting to them, and then it's just like a big explosion. We might as well pour bleach and ammonia on it and watch. So what I want to get to my staff is I need you to pause. I need you to evaluate. I don't want you to react right then and there. We just got to put the pause on and evaluate the situation and what's happening. These are things I ask when I get a call about a situation is I'm going to ask them what is happening, and I'm taking a deep dive. I don't want to know that Brett hit John and left a mark. Okay. What was happening before Brett hit John? What was happening even prior to that? What were the circumstances? What was the environment? Then I try to ask what supports and resources are needed. What did you guys not have? What was the staffing like? Where were the staff? I can't tell you I was out at a camp looking at playground surface to be redone. And I was just sitting, kids came to the playground, which was great. And the staff came over, and the staff weren't even in the playground. They were on the peripheral, clumped together. And sure enough, two kids are crying over here because of an altercation, suggested they spread out. They just kind of looked at me like, who are you? Director comes over, he recognizes me. Suddenly the staff are dispersing into appropriate places. So what resources and supports were needed at that moment? Staff supervision on that playground. So look and see what supports and resources are needed, and were they on site? And do we need to do retraining? Then I ask myself, why is this happening? Typically there's a supervision issue, staff turned their head, got a distraction. I've had a support staff sitting right next to a participant. Another participant dropped a thing of cereal. She bent down to help her pick it up. Within that moment of her back being turned, the child slapped another child across the face. Parents were like, well, the staff wasn't close enough. And I'm like, I don't know how much closer you get. At some point, the impulsivity is going to be there. Why is that happening? How much close supervision? What does that look like? You have to start asking yourself, and whose problem is it? Whose problem is it? Some of the problems that, again, I go back to some of the individuals that I work with, and again, not picking on the staff, but they'll target the individual that has autism on their information card or developmental disability. And then I go on site and it's like a whole posse of them are acting this way. It's not just this boy, it's a whole posse. I don't know what you got to control your camp a little bit more. So, and I'm sure you all are nodding and agreeing because this is the common thing, but these are the things how we start this evaluation process that we're looking at. And the deep dive is knowing what that antecedent to the behavior was. What does it look like? How did they present that day? What was happening in line at the bathroom? And bathroom lines are the worst. The staff line up kids and then expect them to keep their hands to themselves. That's just not reasonable. They can't. So in evaluating the situation, it could be a medical and environmental situation, could be allergies, illness. I know we're all on the watch for different COVID metrics and stuff. Medication, did mom and dad take a vacation? You can't insinuate that, but you can certainly describe the behavior that you're seeing and ask, is this typical behavior? Clothes irritating. We all have that situation. The tags can be rough on skin. It can just make you uncomfortable. Sensory. I am loving the small sizes that we are doing because of the pandemic. I love our camps are no longer like 90 and 120 kids. That's what our child super centers are. I love that they're only 30. It's great. We don't have a lot of the sensory overload. So that's been a real change. I doubt that that's going to continue. I envision us going back to the super center at some point, but I really do like the smaller programs. I think it's just a nicer feeling to go in. I get overwhelmed by going into the center with 110 kids. It's just too dang loud. So I've been going into centers this summer and it's like quiet and nice. Kids are happy, staff are happy. And then we start also asking these questions from a developmental, emotional. Is the child able to understand the language being used and directed at them? And these are great things just to print off and keep with you when you're out at your site. I got asked to go out to a camp with a 3-year-old who English is not her primary language. She doesn't know her English name. She doesn't respond verbally to any of the cues. Parents refer to her as shy, trying to get her adapted to childcare is what their goal was, to socialize with peers and to learn English. These things are not going to happen in the camp structure that she's in. It's too overwhelming for her. She's 3 years old. She's a new 3. She doesn't know her name. That was the other thing that I picked up on. I go, she doesn't know her name. She has no clue what you were saying. Gestures were not really helpful to her. It was just a very challenging situation. Do I think she has a disability? I don't. I just think the language barrier is her biggest issue, and the fact that she has separation anxiety. So, but these are the questions that we start to ask ourselves. Do they have a cognitive capacity? Can they handle this program? Can they comprehend what the social norms are? We have a lot of kids on the spectrum that don't get social norms. Had a young lady say that her friend broke up with her because she didn't want to play with her anymore. She said she wanted to go play another activity. Her friend, she took that as her friend broke up with her and then slapped her in line on the way into the building. So those are the social cue things that we look at. And again, we're just asking questions, looking at these matrix and seeing, okay, if we have a better understanding of the situation, then we can come up with a better strategy for the staff. And then we look at the lack of structure. Is there a lack of structure? And again, these are just questions where expectations made clear. This one I find really hard for the staff to grasp is that they need to set the expectations every time you introduce an activity. So I'm just looking for that. We're going to the playground. We're going to keep hands to self. When it's time to come in, these are our procedures. But if we don't set expectations each and every time with each and every activity, then I don't know where my boundaries are. If you tell me I can spend $100,000 on equipment, I'm going to go spend $100,000 on equipment. If you told me, oh, well, you could only spend that on art supplies. Well, you didn't tell me that was my boundary or my expectation. You said, go spend $100,000 on equipment. I'm going to go buy what I want to buy. Expectations, they give us the boundaries. And you may have to repeat those multiple times. How many times do we have to remind the staff that their time cards are due on Thursday? Over and over and over. So are your activities too challenging? I told you about the volleyball thing, having to wait. My nephew is on the spectrum. And Jordan always says having to wait is his biggest challenge. Now, he recently graduated from high school and he's transitioning, which is great, but he still has no ability to wait. It is the worst thing for him. That's when Jordan gets into trouble. When he was at camp, I would get calls, well, Jordan, we were waiting to line up and Jordan threw a ball. Well, of course, and Jordan's always going to go for the head for whatever reason. So that waiting time, if we can limit that or intersperse it with red light, green light, or I do a lot of Simon Says when I'm out, and I try to model for the staff, particularly with that hand washing time. I'll just start a game of Simon Says with the kids lining up. It keeps their hands to themselves, it keeps them focused, and it makes that transition and less likely to have any behaviors. Getting disappointed, losing is a big one. Again, Jordan shared a lot of these with me. Criticism, if he makes mistakes, he's just going to totally lose it on you. At that point, he doesn't like to be called out for a mistake. I think that's pretty common with some of our kids that we might work with. Feel like that somebody's laughing at him is another trigger for him. So we have to evaluate the situations. If somebody's feeling like they're made fun of, that can lead to a behavioral issue. And then your language. So how we talk to an individual about the behavior, I think our staff get trapped, and I think sometimes we can get trapped in that process as well. So think about what the behavior is that you're trying to discontinue, and how do we infuse that choice behavior? We want to help the individual make that connection between their choices, a consequence of good and bad. And this is not easy by no means. This is a hard thing. We spend a lot of time on it in our trainings, but giving them choices about what we're going to do. You have two choices, and be very clear and succinct with that is the best approach. And I've given a couple different examples on that. And I want to talk about how you present those choices is really what's going to make someone successful. So you can choose to follow the rules. So we may go to the park, or you can choose to have a timeout by continuing to break the rules. It gives them a little bit of a power choice there. I think the language that we use is really critical with our participants, and we tend to focus on what not to do. I hear a lot of stop, don't, knock that off. So you hear a lot of the negative, and we're not hearing enough of the positive. I also am a big believer in planned ignoring. Some things you can ignore, other things you can't. But if I can ignore a behavior, a lot of times that behavior is going to just kind of fade. So my goal is always to try the planned ignoring first. If I can ignore the behavior, great. That's what I want to do. So think about the choice language and how you present that. And the choice option is critical. If we're not giving choices, we're not giving a level of control to that individual. And I don't know what their situations are at home or at school. There might not be a lot of choices. It might be all consequences. Kids need come to camp to have fun, to do the things they can't do at home. but they still have to be empowered through choice. And then positive reinforcement, catch them being good. I think this is a big thing. We don't do this enough with our own staff. You may not feel like you get enough positive reinforcement at work, so you got to look for other ways. This is a constant, I think, battle that we all as supervisors may have, is how do we, praise our staff, catch them being good? Because I feel like sometimes the staff only see me when there's a problem. That's when I get involved. If they're having issues with their direct supervisor, their supervisor may come to me and ask me for help, and then that might be my only interaction with them. So I've taken the role of going out to sites and interacting with my team. Usually in a good summer, I have 150 staff out working. That's a lot of people to remember, and I'll be quite honest with you. A lot of times there's folks I don't know their name. I really try to work on that. But we got to catch them being good. We got to catch our staff being good. We got to catch the kids being good. We got to use that, positive touch, pat on the back, a smile. We do some tangible rewards. If we have like a behavior chart, we'll do stickers. We have done little treasure chest things where they get a prize. Those are typically for the programs where we have consistent attendance, like childcare. That's when we do those types of things. Complimenting, no matter how small. Take time to compliment the individuals. And again, these are all strategies for every individual, not just kids with disabilities. All of them need it, all of them. Identify feelings. This one is big for me. We have to identify the feelings of the individual. This is where they get to have that voice. And this is where you're going to kind of sort through facts and feelings. We all have feelings. We may not remember what people say to us, but we remember what people made us feel, or we remember how people made us feel. I think Maya Angelou said that. So think about the kids that might explode without a warning. They're having some kind of feeling and something's happening. They've got to have a way to release that and express that emotion. And it's really hard to find your words sometimes, especially with some of the littler guys, or even just individuals that can't express their feelings. You may have a friend or a family member that's like this. They just don't communicate their feelings well and they just explode. So allow that individual to express themselves in a nice setting. I would say, I'm going to pick on Janine right now. Janine, when you're ready to talk, I'll be right out here if you choose to share it with me. Janine might come out and have a conversation with me. I gave her time to calm down. She's going to feel like coming and talking to me and telling me what's going on. And just, that's when you're going to listen. Don't try to jump in, allow them to express that feeling. Sometimes we all just need to vent. We started using these flip books. It's a great resource, and it's got like, 30 emotions, different emotions. And then it has a strategy on the back. So it's for staff and the participant. It's something you can do together. Tell me how you're feeling. They can go through, and then you can look at strategies together when they're ready. So we've been using these. We started it with the Rec Zones, our essential childcare program. And it's about making positive choices and identifying your feelings. So some of our kids that we have challenges with, that have a hard time expressing themselves, can use the chart, the booklet, and they're pretty affordable. I don't remember off the top of my head how much they are, but we invested so that there's one in every center. And I think I have the information where you can get it too. So those are really helpful. I talked about this earlier. Tell the child what you want them to do versus what you don't want them to do. I've always said that maybe we should put signs in parks about what you can do in the park versus all the rules of what you can't do. Because sometimes I feel like we're like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. Tell people what they should be doing in the park, and maybe they won't vandalize it. Keep explanations simple and brief. Don't overtalk the kid. I've had staff over the years that just overtalk the kid. They're just, I'm like, narrow it down. Simple, brief. Be prepared to do the repeat with particularly toddlers, allow processing time with other individuals. And just keep in mind that that hostile kid is probably someone that needs a lot of love and guidance. And again, they might not be getting what they need at home. And I am the biggest, probably the biggest, I don't want to say offender, but if I feel like there's a home environment where that child is safer in our program than they are at home, then I advocate that we keep them in our programs. And I have verbalized that, I have written that. That's just how I feel. So kind of this thing about girls and boys, and I think this is so true. Boys run till they hit metal. Boys' attention is through dominance. They have a vocabulary of 25,000 words per day. They are about the hard details. Girls run as a socialization. They gain attention through peers, and they use 45,000 words per day. So a little tidbit on the difference between boys and girls. So when I'm working with a young male, then I know I'm going to focus on hard details. I know they're going to go until they hit metal. And frankly, I've seen that a lot. So tips and techniques for managing behavior, the weighting, try to limit that, self-esteem, look at mistakes, losing, teasing. If you can reduce the number of activities where people are sitting out and losing that are non-competitive activities, I think you'll have a greater met need. Definitely needs for unmet attention. I have a lot of kids that if they get that one-on-one, and I have parents that request that one-on-one more so that the kid has a individual attention. We can't always provide that. Sensory needs, that self-stimulation. I'll show you what our sensory bags look like right now. This one can also lead to the self-stimulation, can also lead to some behaviors that we don't particularly like in camp in public, such as masturbation. Haven't had that in a few years, which I'm really excited about, that we haven't had to deal with that. Impulse control, these are all the games that teach impulse control. And impulse control used to be taught in preschool and kindergarten, but they're not teaching that anymore. They're focusing on academics, which is great. Academics are wonderful, but if I have no impulse control, you can forget me ever learning academics because I can't keep my hands to myself. So all those old games, red light, green light, Simon Says, Mother May I, London Bridges, Ring Around the Rosie, freeze tag, ready, set, go. Those are all impulse control games. In our early learning centers, they went through a whole training on impulse control with us about different games that teach impulse control. So they actually are re-infusing that into our early learning centers because just wasn't existing anymore. So introduce those games, and there's tons of other games that can teach impulse control. That's what we should be putting in our resources for the staff, is games that teach that. Other methods, that routine is so critical. It's so critical. We all have a routine, whether it's your mealtime routine, your bedtime routine, you're getting up in the morning. I know everybody probably had coffee. Maybe you stopped at Dunkin' Donuts and you always stop at the same Dunkin' Donuts. We all have a routine. We all like structure. So our programs should be building that structure because that's where kids are going to thrive. Again, that standing in line and waiting, we need a game. We got to have a game. It'll help you keep your kids with the impulse control doing something. Fidgets, if you need sing-alongs, whatever that looks like. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes, if you want to do that. I like Simon Says. It's my easy go-to. And then that expectation, those are really, we spend a lot of time talking to staff. You need to set expectations. What I can touch, what I can't touch, what the boundaries are, where I'm supposed to be, where I'm not supposed to be. We've got to set the expectation. I even send out expectations to my adult programs. We do an aquarium trip, usually in the fall, to the National Aquarium in Baltimore for Fridays after 5. And we got to the point where we had to set an expectation. We're going to see fish. We're going to the aquarium. We're not going to the cafe there to eat. We're not going to the gift shop. We are going to see fish. We have a limited amount of time. We get there like 6:30. We have a few hours to experience the aquarium. We are not going to spend time waiting for 2 or 3 people to get whatever the food item is. Like 7 other people are waiting. We're not doing that. So the expectation was set. We're not there to eat before you come. We're not there to shop. We'll go to the gift store at the end. We're there to see fish. So I'm all about the expectation. Helping them stay calm. That's another thing, is whatever you can do to provide that motion, music, visual, tactical, pressure, oral. We do chewies as well. You'll see that in our sensory bags. We got to the point where we're just like, let's just give them a chewy, because they were chewing on everything. So these are kind of things that we use in our sensory bags to help folks be calm. We find that our peers come over and use them as well. And then transitions. There's a lot of different ways you can do transitions. I'm sure other folks have some different ones, but here's just a list of different things. We use a lot of timers. You'll see we have 2 sets of timers, your traditional kitchen timer, and then we have a small version of where the red disappears. So we have lots of different timer things that we're doing. We also, our staff have whiteboards, and they'll use that to put time remaining, as well as a schedule they can put on there. And it's all the dry erase stuff. So just simple little transition tips. Again, take this, use this, share with your staff. Everybody knows how to do all this. I'm not the, again, this isn't something I don't think is new for anybody. And this is what our sensory bags look like today. Obviously, we don't put all the chewies in there, but I didn't want to open a package unless I had to. But just some different items that we've put together. We have break cards, we have stops, we have this cues are on a whirly thing, so staff can clip it to their belt and use it when they need it. These are the 2 different timers that we use. This one I really like. It's pretty affordable too. That's one of the spinner fidgets. I'm not a big fan. This ball is the bomb. If I could take that home with me, I would. It's just a squishy, fun ball, and it lights up too. And it just is very sensory. Could squeeze it all day long. I would say on a cost, this sensory bag's probably around $15 to $20. It's equipment that honestly, we probably won't get the majority of it back. It is what it is. We make anywhere between 20 to 30 of these in a season. We were lucky enough to get some relief money from the pandemic to purchase those that we needed. And then we're getting ready to do another order. Again, it can be whatever you want it to be. It's just, it doesn't have to be like this. And then there's other kids that might get some additional supplies. But a lot of times what goes into these drawstring bags, we don't anticipate on getting them back. If we get some of it back, great. Then we run it through our dishwasher and sanitize what we can. The chewies, we just throw away. But other stuff we might clean. Testing limits, think we're good on time still. Doing a lot about testing the limits. So I don't know how many people drove to their office today, but did you find yourself exceeding the speed limit without getting caught? You tested the limit today. Did you lie in bed till the very last minute? Did you hit the snooze button and then you're rushing frantically so you're not late? Did you take your checkbook down to the last dollar, living on the edge there? Then you all have tested the limits. So it's a natural part of childhood. They have to see what their world is like. They're going to test limits. That's what they do. That's how we establish where the boundaries are. Some kids are great at manipulating it. They're awesome. But again, the boundaries provide that source of security. It kind of outlines where I can go. And they're going to develop, by making those mistakes and learning, as we do. Some of the games that we play on our phones, we know there's mistakes, but hey, I got 30 more minutes of a free life, so I'm going to keep going. And parents, these experiences are probably the most frustrating and concerning at times. At least that's what I hear from them. And a lot of times I think we hear that parents are just exhausted and don't know where to go. I feel for them. It can also really make a long day for staff. So I think we have to be upfront about how to manage it. And testing limits is not easy, I'm here to tell you. And I am probably the biggest guilty one of, I can find a limit. I work in the gray areas. It's fun. So offering choices, not consequences. That's where we want to be with our setting the limits. We want to be simple and clear, reasonable, enforceable. I'm going to break these down. They got to be clear and simple. That's the language we use. So, and it's redirecting the participant back to their behavior, and creating that dilemma for that decision making. It's not the same as issuing an ultimatum. And this is what I hear a lot of the times from staff. You didn't clean up after lunch. You need to stay back. You need to clean up. That's an ultimatum. It's also can be construed as a punishment. So we have to have choices. You need to clean up your trash after lunch, and then we can go outside. So reworking that and redirecting that behavior to help them make that decision, we want to offer the choice. You can finish up putting your work now and then go to lunch. Or you're going to have to stay and finish and you might miss something. It's kind of like us, you can finish your work and then go on vacation, or when you get back, or I'm going to cancel your vacation kind of thing. So I think we have to change the language that we use from an ultimatum. If you don't pick up, I'm going to have to call your mother. Well, that's one, a threat and an ultimatum. And I hate when staff always want to call their parent. One, the parents put them in your program for a reason. They got to work, or they got to do whatever they got to do. You can't rely on that. It can be an empty threat. I like to tell the story about when I was in junior high many years ago. I had a teacher, an English teacher. Our personalities just clashed. And I was not a trouble kid, except for science. I always got in trouble in one science class. It was because, again, I clashed with that teacher. And the English teacher said, "We're going to call your father." And I was like, okay, fine, let's call him. Called my dad at work. He's like, "We'll talk about this when I get home." He was kind of laughing on the phone when I talked to him. There was no consequence for that. My dad was like, "What are you doing? Knock it off. Who is that guy?" He seemed, that's what that was. And so what did I learn from that? Not a lot, but I got detention and had to write Egypt in little squares on graph paper. That's what I learned from that. So the ultimatum didn't work for me. It wasn't going to work the way it was delivered. So again, we have to set the limit. It's not the same as issuing an ultimatum. It's offering choices. The purpose of the limits is to teach, not punish. And I think we kind of sometimes want to punish people without saying that we're punishing them. But sometimes when you take away, like they used to years ago, take away gym time and outside time from some of my kids, I'm like, you've ruined your day because you've left them nothing to work towards. So yeah, they're going to rock and roll with you all day long. And you kind of set that up because you took everything away. So there's got to be consequences. I understand that, but they have to be reasonable and enforceable. And I can't enforce a consequence at home. It's got to be within the structure of my program. So you've got to figure out what that's going to look like. And I always prefer to establish that early on with the individual so that they know that what's coming. I had an incident last week with an individual who's been in our program for a while. Sweet kid, really maturing, a lot bigger than what his age is. And he kind of had enough of the day. He was in a program at one of our centers where there's no acoustic panels and the sound in there is really loud. And he was the one that smacked another kid across the face in that brief second. The situation kind of escalated, where he felt he was being singled out and that he just couldn't recover from that incident, decided to elope. And I was on site at that moment. And I just asked him, I go, what is it that you need right now? And he says, I need to go home. I am done. That's the self-advocating. I applauded that. I said, done. I'm going to call your mom right now. She'll come get you. No questions asked. So he'd calmed down a little bit while we were waiting for mom. And he's like, now I'm going to lose all of my privileges. And I said, I don't think so. He goes, yep, I'm going to lose everything. And I said, well, I think that the fact that you self-advocated for yourself on what you needed right at this moment is a real clear message that you're really taking things seriously. And you were able to communicate to me that you needed to leave. And so we made that work. Spoke with the parent. I said, I'm really concerned that there's going to be a privilege taken. I said, because the self-advocacy that he did today was really outstanding. And this is a kid who 2 years ago stood up on a table screaming at his staff saying, you didn't read the green folder, we wouldn't be having this situation right now. So the fact that he can self-advocate in that manner, to me, I was like all about advocating that he not lose any privileges. So we need to listen more when we're setting the limits and really kind of negotiate a little bit ahead of time what that consequence is with that individual, and think about what your program structure looks like and what consequences you might be able to really put in place, but then be upfront that if this behavior is seen, these are the consequences for our actions. Ovan, how are we doing on time?
We have 3 more minutes.
All right, so when I go through and I explain a little bit about the different steps on setting limits, and again, this isn't new stuff. I think it's been out there, maybe just put out a little bit differently. And I hope folks will take this and use it in your trainings. Be positive, use praise, provide statements that are encouraging. Try to redirect those negative statements. Allow kids to have a neutral time, involve them in the rules that I talked about, check for understanding, be firm, be calm, be consistent. Our staff really have a hard time being consistent, but stress to them that is so critical. The consistency that folks need, it just doesn't help when you're inconsistent. And I think you all know that. It just doesn't help because one staff will allow it and another staff doesn't. We had that problem. Interrupt, redirect, when and then, and if and then. These are ways to also set limits. Interrupting and redirecting, it's really, Janine, we need to come back to the art table right now. And then we can play that game once we've cleaned up from art. That's the interrupt and redirect. When and then, when we finish our art and we're done, then we will clean up and then we will do the outdoor activity. If you clean up from art, then we can go to the outdoor activity. So those are the ways to interrupt those behaviors. And this, again, it's a mind shift. You have to train your brain to talk like that, and you need to get your staff trained to do that, and that takes practice, practice, practice. Some tricks of the trade. We set rules for behavior and expectations. We're consistent. Be specific. Don't generalize. Good behavior, bad behavior. I hate that when I see that on an incident report. They had bad behavior. Oh, okay. What does that mean? I don't know. Bad can mean, the food was rotten. What does that look like? Be specific with what that is. Don't use the generalization. I have a contractor that says a child is volatile. She wrote in a report that he's volatile. And I said, what does that mean? I can be volatile. Get me mad enough and I'll be volatile. Positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement. I can't say that enough. Praise the kids. I think we say such negative things all the time. It's so much easier to go with the negative than it is the positive. If I asked you to list 5 things that are positive about yourself, y'all struggle. If I ask you to say 5 things or 3 things that are negative, you're going to give me a whole list. So the positive stuff is really hard for us to come up with. And then I just put together some scenarios that we've had. These are all real scenarios that you're welcome to take, adapt. And these are all things that we do with our team and work on. So just quick, consider behavior reflects the basic need of a child. Try to understand what is motivating that behavior. Stress outside influences can affect behavior. That's that synergy that we all come together, the precipitating factors. It's all a big pot stir. And then seek professional assistance when effective discipline techniques are not working, strategies aren't working. Just get some advice, use your resources, use your colleagues. And I gave you my references. And again, I'm going to send this all out to everybody today.
Thank you so much, Susan. We did have some folks that joined us later. Again, if you're interested in having CEUs, please put your email address in the comment section. But most of all, can we give Susan a round of applause for an excellent presentation? She did a great job. Thank you so much. I learned a lot yet again. As always, Susan, you're a wealth of resources, and a wealth of knowledge. So definitely appreciate you. And yes, Susan, we will be sending the PowerPoint slides. So I saw someone put that in the chat. We will be sending that. And again, if you have any other questions or anything else like that, I think Susan, you'll kind of hang around for a bit.
I am here.
Yep. So if you have any questions or anything else, Susan will be here for a little bit to answer them.